Welcome to Off the Record News. I'm your host, Diana Longry. Thank you for tuning in. This evening we have a jam-packed news story for you. It's about Maplewood. Maplewood planning for the future or obstructing private businesses. We have with us today film footage from past events and also current film footage from the most recent joint meeting of the Maplewood City Council and the Housing and Economic Development Commission that was held on just this past Monday. And they were talking about the development of a site up by the Maplewood Mall for a hotel of their choosing. Now that doesn't sound like much, but as we start to unfold the story, I think you're going to see where this story ends up. Now, we're going to start off first with some of our film footage that we have shown in the past because we want to show the pattern of this city council and current city manager Melinda Coleman and the attitude that they have towards private businesses that are looking to put their own business endeavors into Maplewood, and that when those ideas are in conflict with what the city fathers want to do, the city council and the city manager Melinda Coleman, then they use their governmental authority and pocketbook in order to supersede what those businesses might be interested in doing with their own private dollars. Now, previously, we obtained through the Minnesota Data Practices Act the audio of a closed meeting that was held back in 2018 when the City Council was discussing the purchase of the Moose Lodge in Maplewood at the intersection of Frost and English. Now that may not sound like much. However, in this particular interest, there was another entity, a private business, a private party that was interested in buying the Moose Lodge because they wanted to put a banquet center there to complement, as I can imagine, the Hmong Funeral Home that's on the southeast corner of that very same intersection. But of course, that's contrary to what the city's plans were for that intersection because they want to make sure that they have helped Ramsey County in substantiating their investment in the BRT, the Rush Line BRT that is planned for that very same location. So let's get started with this audio. What we've done with this audio, because it was a closed meeting, there is no video, but under state law, they have to record the audio. And as I indicated, we obtained it through the Data Practices Act. What we've done is that we have superimposed still images over the audio so that you can see at least the face that matches the voice that you're hearing on this audio. So we're at the point of the meeting where the city manager and the then community development director are telling the council that the Moose Lodge has given the city a counteroffer to the city's offer to buy the Moose Lodge because there is another entity, another party who is also looking to purchase the property. So let's listen in.
So the purpose of the meeting tonight is to discuss the potential purchase agreement or purchase offer that we made on the property, also known as the Moose Club.
Good. Wow! That is a mammoth building. You know that, right?
Wow.
No.
Oh, it's gigantic.
It's huge.
It
The
is
basement
huge.
Is big.
I've never been.
As you see, Melinda Coleman, the city manager, is making the announcement to the council. The woman who is giddy about all of this is the former mayor, Nora Slowick, who went on to become the head of the Metropolitan Council. Now, as you probably recall, though, she has already since resigned as the head of the Metropolitan Council. Probably a good thing, since you can hear she's really actually quite giddy and doesn't really look like she's very analytical about the process. But let's continue with the clips of this audio clips of this meeting as they start to talk about the price and how they're going to outbid the other entity.
Just got another offer that Ron has in front of him just before our workshop started. And they came back and countered our offer from 880 to 925. So we're not sure what's going on with that second party bid that was presented. That offer was presented to the Moose Lodge, to their board here a week ago Saturday. But our offer was $880,000, and there's that map that Ms. Coleman was referring to.
Yep, there's that map that City Manager Melinda Coleman's been referring to. Wow, that's what it's all about, isn't it? The math. So as this sits at this point, in 2018, the city offered $880,000 for the Moose Lodge property. The competing bidder, a private party who wanted to buy that site for their own private business interests, developing a banquet center, they outbid the city, and now the Moose Lodge is coming back and saying, well, we'll give it to you, the city, if you increase your offer to $925,000. So let's hear what the council has to say about that.
Talking, should we wait? Should we proceed? Where does council want to land here with this?
Do we know anything about the other offer?
We do not, other than, and I had shared this with Melinda as well, we believe that they're looking at a banquet/community center there. So kind of a similar use to what's going on there now. In fact, both of them would be an allowable use. It wouldn't require any special approvals from council because it's a continued use of what they have in place now. But we don't know that for sure. But that's what we were told.
So we buy it and then they use it for their own purpose?
We don't know. It's still kind of muddy yet.
Did they say anything else with the 925 offer?
So you heard former Mayor Nora Slawick say, so if they buy it, they'll use it for their own purpose? Duh. Of course they would. And you can see why it is a perfect fit for this other party who is looking for this property. Because if they want to develop a banquet center and community center, they don't have to go through any different kind of CUP in order to have that business operate, because that's currently how it is zoned and how the land use is planned for. But you see, the city knows that they can't keep them from having a banquet center there unless they outbid them, because they can't use the zoning to stop them. They can't put conditions on them like under a conditional use permit. And so this really does interfere with what the city's plans are for this corner. Let's listen in again.
I think the options here, besides what Ron has outlined, is a preference as to whether we want to take the lead role in the redevelopment of this parcel or whether we want to let the private sector take the lead in the role of this development of this parcel. And so that's kind of the policy directive that we're looking for tonight. And if you do want us to counter, what kind of offer would that be? Those are, the things that we need to talk about.
Can I ask a question about we believe that the other party who may be interested in this piece is interested in another kind of entertainment event center?
Correct, using the same facility as it is as a banquet event center. That's what we're being told. Now, I haven't ground truth that. I think, guys, I was talking to Rhonda. I don't know. That's
Okay.
what we're being told.
I mean, it seems like it's a prime spot for housing because it's right by the senior housing and the other housing, and it's
Well,
right by the trail,
the
right,
other-
both trails.
I know,
And
by
that's-
our transit
The
coming through.
transit piece is the key.
Yeah.
Albeit that's down the road.
The transit piece is the key down the road. And you heard how former Mayor Nora Slawick is like, oh, but there should be housing there. We have to have housing there. And you saw that then council member Marley Abrams chimes in and says, well, what, they want an entertainment type of business there? No, we have to have housing. We have to have something that supports the BRT. We can't have the private business do what they could do given the current zoning that it is, given that the use that they want to put that property to is completely consistent with the ordinance, the zoning, and the land use and how it's guided. So how are they going to stop this from happening? Because you heard Melinda Coleman say, well, it's a public policy decision that you guys are going to have to make. Do we let it just develop the way it is, or do we want to develop it the way we want it? Let's continue to listen in.
What else, what other
The next
decisions?
question would be how much you want to offer. What would you like to counter?
Well, what do you think makes sense?
So we're at a $45,000 difference right now?
Yeah, it's like, you made an offer on a piece of property for $880. The sellers come back at another $45,000. So I would
I
suggest
would
accept-
recommend we just do the 9 1/4 and if not lose this other 25 grand or something. I mean,
Is that what they proposed to us, is 9 1/4?
Yeah.
And is there anything weird about that 9 1/4?
And so you hear council member Marley Abrams asking, well, is there anything weird about that number that they are countering with, that they will sell it to us for $925,000? Is there anything weird about that number? Well, of course, keep in mind, Marley Abrams is a skilled litigator. She's an attorney. And so she's asking if the number is weird. Well, what is weird about this number? It is higher than what the market value is, and probably the appraised market value, the tax market value and the appraised market value of this property. And you know, a private party, when they're buying property, if they're borrowing money from a bank, they are limited to what is the value of that property when they're looking to buy the property and to have borrowing the money from a bank. So they can't go and spend an extra $45,000 more in order to get a property that then now is overpriced and priced beyond the market value. So, but you heard Council Member Brian Smith saying, well, gosh, maybe. Well, let's take a look at our next clip as we continue where they decide to jump off from.
What else, what other
The next
decisions?
question would be how much you want to offer. What would you like to counter?
Well, what do you think makes sense?
So we're at a $45,000 difference right now?
Yeah, it's like, you made an offer on a piece of property for $880. The sellers come back.
This is basically 13% over tax value, which to me seems like a pretty good deal if we came in 9 1/4. I mean, that's a 13%.
I can live with the 9 1/4.
Our target is 20 to 25%. I mean,
Right.
that's what the other, that's where we're.
That'll happen next. After we
What?
start going here, that'll be the next.
So Council Member Brian Smith, he's done the math. Well, okay, so that's 13% more than the market value. That sounds like a good deal, he says. Then you hear Mr. Dwayne Dewey Canicchio, the Community Development Director at the time, say, well, and it's also under our goal of spending 20 to 25% over the market value to get the property. So you see, in order to interfere with what a private business or a private party who is looking to purchase this land in order to interfere with their business plans, the city is expending city resources, residents' tax dollars, and as it turns out later, sanitary sewer fund dollars in order to outbid and pay more for the property than it's worth so that they can block the development of a banquet and entertainment or / community center at this site. Now, this is not the first time that City Manager Melinda Coleman has been engaged in blocking private party efforts of private development. Back in 2006, she was the Community Development Director. I happened to have been the mayor, and at the time, there was a push to develop what was called the tourist cabin site right off of Frost Avenue. And there was a particular company, ERS Development, who was very keen on securing that site because they believed that that site, being so close to Phelan Lake, would be a proper place to put high-end, market-rate housing because of the amenity of being close to the lake and the trail that goes around Lake Phelan. Well, that, of course, was contrary to what Melinda Coleman wanted at that time. She wanted affordable housing or voucher housing to be put in that location instead. And so she interfered and was talking with the owner of the property about how not to do business with ERS Development. Now, how I know this is because ERS Development sent me a letter indicating that they were consulting an attorney about possibly suing the city because of Melinda Coleman's actions in interfering with their contracting rights. So you see, what was done at the Moose site in 2018 isn't anything new for Melinda Coleman. And she has a willing participant with her in Marley Abrams and Nora Slawick. Now let's fast forward to 2019. Well, you know, the city of Maplewood, they started up this work group called the North End Study Work Group to look at how Maplewood foresees the future of the Maplewood Mall. Part of that plan was to look at the mall area as a feeder housing project for supporting the BRT route and the stops that are part of the rush line that Ramsey County is developing. And as part of that plan, there were a number of businesses that were excluded from the project and from the work group. One namely being the Myth, which is an entertainment center up by the mall that has about 50 to 70 events per year, that the restaurants around the mall appreciate having the concerts there because it really helps to bring people from many areas of the metro area to the Maplewood Mall area as a destination location and supports the restaurant and hospitality industry. But they were very much absent from the planning process as if they were not part of the big plan. Because there's been this concerted effort that somehow or other the Myth doesn't quite fit in to what Maplewood's plans are. So Maplewood decided in their infinite wisdom that they were going to put together this big plan that would put huge conditions, 34 of them, on the liquor license of the Myth. And many of those conditions were irrelevant. The city did not afford the myth opportunity for a public hearing. And so they put this plan, these conditions on the liquor license. And as a result of that happening in June of 2019, the myth sued the city of Maplewood. And we have had several programs going through that complaint and talking about the claims that are in that lawsuit. Then in November 2019, the myth was again before the city council to have an administrative hearing regarding the renewal of their liquor license. So that's where we're going to pick up now and talk about the next issue of obstructing private business. Let's take a look.
As spelled out in the city code, when conditions are placed on a license, the licensee can request an administrative hearing regarding those conditions. And previously tonight, you have been given the letter where the licensee did request a hearing. And so you will be having an administrative hearing tonight. If the conditions are approved by council, or whatever conditions are approved by council tonight, those conditions will remain with the license until it's removed by action of council.
So that's the setup. As I indicated, they called for an administrative hearing so they could be heard before the council continued to put conditions on the license. This litigation is still active in Ramsey County. Let's continue with the comments of the attorney.
The last time we were here, you treated my client and her lawyers with a disgusting display of disrespect. You demanded respect, but you did not give respect. A true failure for public servants. You allowed Councilmember Juniman to yell that my client should not have brought her lawyers, since she did not care what lawyers had to say. She did not care what the evidence was or the facts. The irony that she screamed that statement about bringing your lawyers with Mr. Batty, the city attorney, sitting next to her, that irony did not go unnoticed by those watching. Mayor, you're a lawyer, and you know better. But rather than tell her her statements were out of line, you made it worse. You refused to let us address the comments and to respond, and then you ramrodded the so-called operational action plan to a vote.
Some of you may not have seen our show that was back in July and August with regard to that particular meeting where Kathy Juniman said these comments about don't bring your attorney. And you may think, well, you know, sometimes attorneys do exaggerate a little bit, and maybe he's actually blowing it up a little bit more than it really was. But you know what? We dug back into our archives to confirm that indeed Councilmember Juniman did say, leave your attorneys at home. We don't need them. I don't like them. Let's take a look.
Did you have something more?
Yes, thank you. I think that's verified what I was asking, but I can't resist, so I won't. I think this conversation would have gone worlds better with the absence of attorneys. I may as well say it. They speak just fine for themselves. We can communicate with each other. I've never really liked attorneys a whole lot anyway, but this gets in the way. The inferences and things came from you. Let them speak. We're talking to each other now, and the chief's talking with them. That's what we want. To be blunt, stay away next time. Wow. To be blunt, stay away next time. We can talk to these people. They know what to say.
In other words, we want the upper hand. We don't want somebody coming in here with an advocate, because we want to be able to twist things the way we want. We want to have our way, and we don't want anybody to have an argument back, to challenge what we have to say. And who better to challenge what this council has to say but an attorney who can speak on behalf of their client's best interests and their property interests, by the way. Now, what is fascinating about this is that this attorney who represents the myth, he told now appointed Mayor Marley Abrams that she should have known better because she's an attorney. When I heard him tell her that, I had to chuckle because it reminded me of back in 2006 when she stood before the council and was defending then city manager Fersman, and his sidekick Melinda Coleman for the various things that they were doing, that she was up there defending how they should stay employed by the city and how the council had no right to choose their own city manager. And yet, she was told that night, you're an attorney, you know better. And here she is, now appointed mayor, having chose her own city manager, Melinda Coleman. You see how the connections connect as far back as back then. Well, let's continue and let's go back now to the December 2019 meeting when the myth is having their administrative hearing on the conditions that are being placed on their liquor license.
I say thank you to the new attorneys for the city for acknowledging that the city's actions taken in June were illegal. But unfortunately, it's too late. The damage has been done. The city's announcement that the chief of police could shut down the myth at any given moment caused entertainers and musical performers to refuse to perform at the myth. And in addition, they would require, if they were to perform, to be paid all up front in case the chief closed the myth. This caused my client's business to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Your actions approving that resolution was the very definition of arbitrary, capricious, and oppressive.
So you can hear the impact of those actions upon the myth's business and their ability to contract with the performers to come to their entertainment venue. But let's continue.
Your failure resulted not only in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of damages to my client, but resulted in the city being sued by my client to hold you accountable. Your failures also resulted in the real estate developer that we had obtained that wanted to build a $20 million hotel next to the myth to abandon the project.
This is where we hear about the myth working in conjunction with the developer to put in a hotel by the Maplewood Mall, not by the hospital, not by Beam Avenue, but up by the myth, where it would be seen and be accessible very easily from the freeway and the exit and entrance ramps of White Bear Avenue onto 694. A premium, optimal location for a hotel. But that is not consistent with what the city wants because they had already done their North End work group study recommendations, and they have it in their head that they must have a hotel over by the hospital, over by Beam Avenue, a long ways away, relatively speaking, from the intersection of the entrance and exit ramps, which would be the key location for a hotel. So this now brings us to the meeting of the HETC Commission, the Housing and Economic Development Commission, and the City Council that was held this past Monday. So we're coming to that meeting, and this first clip is where one of the city planners is talking about their North End Work Group recommendations.
Work to create two visions, a near-term vision and a long-term vision. The near-term vision identifies areas for immediate improvements and those that have a high likelihood of redevelopment potential within the next several years. So we're looking at 5 to 10 years is what we deem near-term in the context of this plan. These primarily consist of vacant or underutilized properties. So we're thinking the Sears site, the Birch Run Station Shopping Center were focused areas. We're looking for additional residential, mixed-use, retail, office, a hotel.
There we hear it. The city's plans for a hotel over by Beam Avenue. And if you look at the various plans that have been developed from this North End Study Work Group, you can see exactly where they think that hotel should go, because they are going to be doing their next steps, which is the zoning to make it so. Just like in the Gladstone area, where they had this idea about what they wanted to do, but they were Johnny-come-lately in that the zoning wasn't for housing, the zoning was commercial for a banquet center. In this case, up by the mall, the zoning has to be changed in order to effectuate their recommendations of this North End Study Work Group. Let's continue.
So where we're at now, because again, this is so new, that's just where we're at. There hasn't been a project that has happened because of the vision plan yet. Staff is currently working with Poison and Taylor on creating a zoning ordinance, or the beginning stages of what that zoning ordinance would look like. So I know in the vision plan, we have a design guideline, and that helps us envision what development would look like. How do we create a zoning ordinance that codifies that vision so when developers come in, they know exactly what the city is looking for, they can follow this prescribed schedule to get there. So we're working at the very beginning stages with Rita Trapp on how that ordinance would look. And we'll start to unveil that later this spring, where we'll incorporate property owners into the mix. Our planning commission will be heavily involved in our council as that ordinance progresses.
And so looking at their plan, their recommendations out of this work group, and then looking at how they have to change the land planning ordinances and how the land is guided, much of it is going to be converted from the type of commercial use it is today to residential housing. And it would be very curious indeed to see how they are looking to change the guidance of the land use for the area that the myth had a developer who was interested in putting a hotel. Let's take a look at our next clip.
Staff, we've met with a couple key property owners about potential development, mainly on the Birch Run Station, how we jumpstart that vision. So that's kind of where we're at this point.
You heard him say that they've been talking to the owners of the Birch Run Station in order to jumpstart that action. Well, if you're familiar with that particular area, the Birch Run Center is actually another smaller little strip mall to the west of Maplewood Mall, sandwiched kind of between the hospital and the mall. And it's sort of a L-shaped mall, and right on its southern end, there's a restaurant and a number of other smaller businesses, but according to the Maplewood plan, that's exactly where they want to put the hotel. So you see, they are already working on this hotel idea, which coincidentally would be competing with the hotel development that the myth was working on over by the intersection of 694 and White Bear Avenue. It makes you scratch your head to think about, well, what's going on here? Is there something more in this reason behind Maplewood's continuing in their lawsuit with the myth? Is it more than just the liquor license? Let's continue.
There's more work to do on developer meetings. Just some of the initial feedback that I've heard, probably might comment that out, but we've shown people Gladstone property, like the Moose Lodge, and also like the site, for Birch Run. In general, the reaction on Moose Lodge is, oh, okay, yeah, I can see that, and yeah, that's okay. I can see that. You talk about then they go, oh wow, yeah, oh wow, like they can see it, but it's a much very much more complex thing that takes a lot more challenges.
So now we have another one of the city planners talking about how the city is out there showing the Moose Lodge site, remember that the city of Maplewood bought overpriced, more than the market value, and that the city is also promoting the Birch Run site. Well, why are they promoting the Birch Run site? They don't own it. Or are they trying to find interest in finding a developer who wants to build this illustrious hotel that the city of Maplewood wants on Beam Avenue by the hospital? Let's continue.
One of the big draws for the mall, and I'm sure it's something we had at Henson years ago, is a lot of its customers actually came from western Wisconsin. Coming down 36, are we, those of you who are on that planning group, are we looking at things that will keep that reach out to western Wisconsin? Something, to maybe keep them there before they go on to Rosedale? I know we're not trying to replace Rosedale Mall, but what are we doing to capture that western Wisconsin to get that reach farther outside of Maplewood?
So that is Mark Jenkins, who is a resident of Maplewood, and he is the chair of the HETC Commission. And I do want to mention to you that the reason we have this film footage isn't because the city is filming it so that they can play this meeting on their cable channel and on their internet channel so the people of Maplewood understand what is going on with the development and potential plans for the Maplewood Mall area. No, the city isn't going to put this on the airwaves at all. The only reason we have film footage of it is because our production company, Put Your Hands Together Productions, was there with our cameras. So let's continue.
Looking at western Wisconsin, the draw for retail is considerably different. And so that's why I think that we're looking at talking about entertainment, movie theater, hotel, restaurants, food hubs, different kinds of things like that would bring people in, because retail just has changed so much that filling it with retail, I don't think is
I agree.
Yeah, so focused on the entertainment, the restaurants, and green space, and housing.
That is appointed Mayor Marley Abrams. Okay, now she's saying in order to be attractive to people to come to that mall area, we need to have entertainment. And yet the city of Maplewood is trying to put the myth out of business. They are the entertainment destination up by the mall. But Maplewood is now going to get into the entertainment business. Oh my goodness. I'm I'm speechless. And you heard her say that they need to have entertainment, and they're going to have housing and green space. That's what she wants. She wants entertainment, housing, and green space. Let's continue.
Well, I think one of the things that we kind of considered too is having it more of an entertainment, kind of destination, and the fact that have housing there, and the demographics being, there's a lot of grandparents who like to bring their grandkids somewhere. And, you know, not really competing with Rosedale, but kind of enhancing, you know, where people have a choice to go and have different types of shopping. I don't know if we, you know, want to have like same big change, but maybe, you know, you have more of the Minnesota maybe, or things that, you know, could support the community more.
That is Joy Chuck, who is a member of the Hetze Commission, and she's saying, well, okay, we talked about entertainment. That was what we talked about. And I think in some ways she's sort of wondering about, well, where is the emphasis on all this housing and green space? We're talking about commercial property. Let's continue.
Just make a comment. I think it's interesting that I really like it that the plan works regardless of what happens to Maplewood Mall. In other words, say retail survives and we do, you know, the mall, sorry, figures out a way to keep it going as a retail mall with some entertainment or whatever, great. This plan works with that. But if you make it worst case scenario for Maplewood Mall and it just goes belly up and it gets bulldozed and whatever, this plan works with that too. And I think that's really the strength of this plan.
This gentleman is a member of the Hetze Commission. The one issue, though, he doesn't factor into his comments is this, is that the city's plan that they are putting together and the rezoning that they're doing creates ambiguity in the north end. Because does it signal that we are open to commercial business up by the Maplewood Mall? Or is it signaling instead that we want to convert over 50% of what was Maplewood Mall surrounding area into housing and green space? How can the Maplewood Mall survive if you've got mixed signals coming from City Hall? And it's much like what the attorney for the myth was saying, is that by your actions of putting conditions on our liquor license that the police chief can shut us down at any time, it's created ambiguity with the entertainers. They don't want to come because what if it's their night to perform, they're counting on it, and the police chief decides to shut them down? But you see, it's much the same type of scenario going on with their land use planning for the entire mall area. That ambiguity creates the opportunity for it to fail so that the city can indeed then be able to move forward with their housing plans. Let's continue.
But for multiple reasons, I'd like to see a hotel. And I think if the developer came forward this summer, it's conceivable that within 2 years, certainly ground could be broken, if not construction completed. I just think there's a real practical, when you think about it, it is kind of weird that if you want to, like, I go to church here in Maplewood, we bring in speakers for our conference once a year, right? We have to put them up away, you know, and it's not a big deal, but it just seems weird, right? That you have to drive 15 minutes to get to a hotel when you live in a suburban metropolitan area. It seems like there should be a nice, you know, a decent, I mean, just any hotel, right? We're not looking for something fancy. But we have.
You heard it there again. The need and desire for a hotel. And this gentleman seems to think that this is conceivable within 2 years and breaking ground. Where's his insider information on that? Certainly, if the city council and city manager Melinda Coleman hadn't interfered, potentially the myth and the developer they had in mind could be doing exactly that. But their deal has been squashed. And now the city is seeing how that's a possible opportunity in the next 2 years. Let's continue.
Hotel.
The one that's on LEOD, is that one gone?
There's a hotel on the other side of,
Talking about the Emerald?
Yeah.
Is that still there?
Please.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
We don't want to see it die, we want it to thrive.
But yeah, I think we should clarify though, a hotel, any hotel, your response is going to be, you have Emerald Inn. We need to be clear in that. We need to say, you know,
Basically, a fairly high-class hotel.
A family-friendly hotel.
maybe.
There is a hotel near the Maplewood Mall on the east side of White Bear Avenue by 694, the Emerald Inn. But you could hear the disdain in the council member's voice and the members of the Hetsy Commission joking about the Emerald Inn. And as if they are just totally unacceptable. Let's take a look where this goes.
For me, a 3-star would be preferable. Yeah, that would be preferable.
Or maybe a long-term stay. I was just out at Southville and they have a long-term stay by Hilton. What is it called?
Extended stay in there.
Yeah. Right there on the property. So an extended stay, that would work with, we've got memory care facilities here, senior facilities here. So having that accessible to a family member, and the hospital too, I think that would be really good.
So we have one of the council members, the first one that was speaking, Sylvia. She needs to have a 3-star hotel. And of course, appointed Mayor Marley Abrams, she's now expanding upon this and saying, oh, let's have an extended stay. Wow. And it makes you wonder what is going to support this type of hotel development, especially if they've run the myth out of town and that they've predominantly closed down the commercial uses at the Maplewood Mall and converted it all to housing and green space. Well, let's continue.
I think when we talk specifics, whether it's an extended stay or whatever, I really would go to the hospital. What types of care do they provide? Because, if you've got a cancer ward, for example, extended stay is really helpful. But if it's more emergency medicine where people are in and out in a couple days, an extended stay may not be a grab.
I'm kind of looking more at, we've got the whatever the Alzheimer's place, we've got the other one that is in our old hotel there that is memory care. And so family members come in and they want to be able to see relatives and stay for a little while and have it more of a home environment. That's, it's an alternative that, 3M is not fun. Other kinds of things happening in the city that,
Appointed Mayor Marley Abrams is in a dream world. The majority of the seniors that are staying in our senior care centers in Maplewood come from Maplewood. Their families are here. That's why they're living in facilities in Maplewood, because their families are here and their families are already living here. She also makes mention that 3M is just a little ways down the road. Doesn't she realize that there is already a hotel just only about a half a mile right next to 3M on the St. Paul side of 94? Let's continue.
Do you remember that hotel that we saw around Southdale? Wasn't it Southdale on our court?
yeah, that's the Hilton.
And that was...
Well, there's a number of them.
Well, there's...
The Hilton, the big one.
All I remember is just kind of being kind of dark. But the hospital was on like the other side of it. When we talk about why we would want a hotel here, besides the hospital issues and the clinics and things like that, truthfully, just family and coming to visit. is really important to have somewhere to, besides putting people on your floor, you know. We don't have that luxury, if you will. And to me, it's very basic. I mean, it's one hotel. There is a hotel down by 3A, but we don't have anything up here.
Councilmember Sylvia Nesbitt, she brings up this issue that is a constantly running theme, not only in this meeting, but in other past meetings that we've covered, that somehow or other, that this hotel location off of Beam Avenue where the Birch Run Center is, that it has to be next to the hospital because it's going to be tied into the operations of the hospital, that it's going to support the hospital. And she alludes to the fact that over in Southdale, they have a hospital right next to the Southdale Mall and all of that. But I thought to myself, you know, not all hospitals are the same. So I did a little research, and this is what I found from the U.S. News and World Report that has an extensive compilation of ratings of hospitals throughout the whole entire United States. First of all, in Maplewood, the St. John's Hospital is generally considered a general surgical hospital. They have only 184 beds. And according to the U.S. News and World Report, they don't have any particular area of medicine that they specialize in, that they are especially known for, like open heart surgery or some other kind of specialty. But there are 2 procedures or conditions that they have been rated as high performing. And those 2 areas are colon cancer surgery and heart failure. So in other words, St. John's Hospital is a good hospital to go to if you've got a heart attack. Now, of course, that is good to know when you have a local community hospital, that one of the areas that they excel in is treating heart attacks. Because where do heart attacks occur? In the neighborhood, so that the ambulance can pick you up and get you to the hospital quick, and that they're equipped to take care of it, and that the survival rate is very high at St. John's under these circumstances. Now, I compared that, though, to Southdale Hospital. They have 390 beds. They also do not have any particular specialties that they're known for. However, they are rated as high performing in 9 different processes or conditions. Now, think about which one of these types of processes are going to require somebody to stay overnight at the hospital, which might require that they have a family member stay overnight at a hotel. Abnormal aortic aneurysm repair, aortic valve surgery, COPD, colon cancer surgery, heart bypass surgery, heart failure, hip replacement, knee replacement, and lung cancer surgery. So you can see at the Southdale Hospital, they have a lot more surgery going on in which they are rated as high performing. And I think this is a key factor to consider into this if you're thinking that a hospital is going to support a hotel. You have to look at who the hospital serves. Let's continue.
Right. There's 1 or 2 up in Venice Heights. There's like I don't know what sustains that there, but something sustains.
Holiday Inn.
I think it's on the highway.
There are several, well,
Which is their point, they have to go out of Maplewood.
Right.
Yeah.
I think Jimmy's, that restaurant venue, they have a lot of weddings there. They're affiliated with the hotel.
And then the one across the street, because that's where my family stayed the last time they came. It's very nice.
It's just not here.
Vadnais Heights has a hotel, but as appointed Mayor Marley Abrams points out, well, it's associated with Jimmy's, where there's a lot of wedding business going on. Now, we're going to skip to our last clip, clip number 26, because our reporter was able to ask a question of Council Member Bill Knudsen about the tie-in between the hospital and the hotel. Keep in mind, he is a former administrator of St. John's Hospital. He also continues to be a consultant in the medical field. So let's hear his answer as to why the hospital is going to support a hotel.
Bill is an expert on hospitals, what do you see as the trends there in St. John's? Are they going to need more hotels there, or are they going to need less hotels over there for St. John's as you see funding?
It depends on what kind of services they provide. In other words, the more intense the services, the more likely families would come in and stuff. So it's who's first? What do they do first? So, that cancer center that's there, the office building across the street with specialists, that tends to build the type of patient that would be long hospitalization where families would come in. So,
okay, and you see that's coming over to St. John's, more cancer care, more long-term cancer care is coming over to St. John's?
Well, I think what's going to, what'll happen is there's a rumor, and just the more than a rumor is that St. Joe's is in trouble.
Right.
So the likely thing, if I were, it's been a long time since I've been involved, the likely thing would be to start to move more services out to St. John's, which would change the whole complexity.
Okay, so, got it. Okay, thank you.
It's a moving thing.
Yes.
It sounds reasonable. However, according to the U.S. News and World Report, in looking at the specialty of cancer, St. John's Hospital scored 31.2 out of 100 points available. So I don't see that that is going to be the long-term extended direction of St. John's Hospital. He mentioned St. Joe's. St. Joe's has 253 beds, and they have high-performing scores in COPD, heart bypass surgery, which St. John's does not score high performing in. They also have hip replacement, knee replacement, and heart failure. But here is a trend that we have shared with you on these programs. Hip replacement and knee replacement are being moved over to the list of day surgeries. They are not going to be overnight surgery procedures in the future. The insurance companies aren't going to pay for it, and neither is Medicare. The hospital that's closest to St. Joe's is the Regents Hospital, which has 450 beds and scores high, performing in 9 procedures and conditions, the same as Southdale. Will the absorption of the loss of beds in St. Joe's go over to St. John's, or simply a half a mile away to Regents Hospital, where they can accommodate the types of procedures that are being done at St. Joe's? So I leave it to you to think about Maplewood. Are they planning for the future or obstructing business? Thank you.